Gears of War has a long legacy. Cliff Bleszinski and the epic Unreal crew ushered in the 7th generation of consoles with a massive hit on the Xbox 360 that set the tone for the entire generation. And as a continuation of the epic impact the team made on the PC and 3D gaming space throughout the 90s and early 2000s, they then took the console world by storm with Gears, and never really let go of it, with its current behemoth in Fortnite today proving they're still relevant. They handed over the reins to Xbox at the start of last generation, with a newly formed coalition picking them up with a new chapter and 5th entry in the series with Gears 4. The team have since made it their own whilst being a standout for Unreal 4 engine development and the suite of Xbox platforms. Gears defied expectations on the Xbox One, offering a 1080-30 dynamic game that was beautiful where other teams were struggling on that machine. Gears 5 continued and amplified this only 1 year ago, but time waits for no man, and thanks to Gamepass and new DLC in Hivebusters, we are once again thrust into waist-high walls, roadie runs and lancer cuts, with a new mini episode for the Gears universe across all Xbox and PC platforms. So let's strap on, kick down and jump in for some next-gen Gears action. But before we get into the meat of it, let's jump over to this video's sponsor. BoostGaming is an online retailer for the US and UK based markets, and you can buy the latest games DLC, but more importantly top up your wallet and spend it on those treats over that Christmas period. And right now, between the 14th and 27th of December, you will get 10% off the RRP for everything on the site, and by using my code below, you not only support me, but you get an additional 5% off that value, 15% off top-up wallets for both Xbox, Nintendo and PlayStation, and many, many more. Means this festive period you're going to get the best value for money and you're going to support the channel. So go on, treat yourself and tell them Michael sent you. This Hivebusters DLC is everything I said Game Pass would become. Smaller, shorter, more episodic games, or bigger games broken down into bite-sized chunks to play over 1 to 3 sittings. For me, the length of the game has never ever been my priority. In fact, the opposite is true. As time is much shorter for gaming as you have other commitments, I value a great experience, story or challenge over a long or drawn out one. Thus, the fact this can be completed in 4 or so hours is fine by me. As a brand new high quality game from a mammoth studio, it just adds value to Game Pass. Would I continue to be interested if a vast 16-hour large scale game was broken down into 4 episodes released across 12 months of Game Pass subscription? Future plans aside though, the game is instantly on point with some dry humour, stunning cinematics, and an horrendous, I'm not sure if it's supposed to be Scottish accent aside, it feels like a Gears game.
Just trucks. Got to surprise the boy on his birthday.
Was there a point to your story?
From high production values, a dense jungle setting, and enough sudden ambushes to give you that warm, comfy slipper feeling right out of the gate. Now, best of all, it ships across PC and all last and current generation consoles, which means no one gets hung out to dry. Well, almost. Now, it follows a retired soldier's return to combat, his old stomping ground complete with 3-player co-op, or as I generally choose, me, myself and I. Now, the AI controlled team members are nothing great, but they can run, gun and rescue with the best of them. The only thing dumber is the locust enemies, who rarely react faster than a drunken sailor on a Friday night out. But the hordes are enough of a challenge in numbers alone to satisfy your gun-toting hunger throughout the 6 chapters. It has a decent story, witty-ish banter, and is well aware of itself and its history throughout. Think more Netflix drama than Scorsese blockbuster. It entertains and drives the plot without trying too hard or outstaying its welcome. Now, Unreal Engine 4 is again at the heart of the game, with its unmistakable, bright, cartoonish style, with characters that bear a close resemblance in design and skin shading to DreamWorks from How to Train Your Dragon. The excellent motion capture, facial bone rigging, post effects and lighting throughout the real-time cutscenes are as impressive as anything prior from the team. Even the odd man out now in the base Xbox One does a commendable job in delivering high quality assets, materials and animation that seems beyond its remit at times. The sacrifices are evident at points that I'll get to, but by and large the sheer quality on display here proves that the Coalition are still at the top end of the Microsoft Studio teams. You can see clear sacrifices in bloom, lighting, depth of field, and also screen space reflections are missing in cutscenes and ambient occlusion, screen space ambient occlusion. You get a good shot here when they touches the screen. You can see the shadows of the dash and the area that I've circled. There's more ambient light and self-shadowing in terms of the game overall over the S and the X than there is on any other version. Action has a great deal of impact from the stunning backdrops you see them through. It feels like a faster paced Uncharted game at times, with the jungle setting and more mysterious premise as it unfolds. The game has and remains a poster child for Xbox, with its DLC seeing boosts to each other from Gears 5 itself on Series X and the S patches all being improved further with this DLC. The X and the S offer some nice increases over the base consoles, with higher quality screen space reflections and a wider level of materials on the X that goes above the previous insane SSR of PC. Both also offer screen space GI and ambient shadows to enhance self-occlusion and lighting that really helps solidify many scenes and sequences. Shadows are also much higher quality and now offer a sharper resolve with cleaner edges, enhancing the details specifically on certain point lights and spotlights in the title. Generally, the Xbox One Series S and the X are very close, even though ambient lighting, the shadow quality and the GI is slightly better on the S. Texture quality, assets and materials are very close between them because generally they're not that far apart.
We've got drones.
Looks like a small patrol.
Now, subsurface scattering really stands out here as skin, light and movement are often given centre stage. Not only is this evident on characters, but scenery, leaves emit transparent light and shadows from below, hordes have a soft pinky skin tone, and even the locust sacks display it when light penetrates the surface. A high quality use of decals on blood splats, dirt, grime and all areas that add up to the impact the game gives, on top of all of the particles and alpha effects, really swamp the screen. Adaptive tessellation is used across all versions, which digs in some of the dirt as you crawl or shoot the hordes down. It's better on the higher end consoles, but it even runs at a limited form on the Xbox One S. That sumptuously high sampled per object motion blur is present, but this was in Gears of War 3 and it works perfectly well here. Limbs, legs, guns, combat, everything looks silky smooth when that's added on top. The high quality cinematic presentation is wrapped off with those canned animation sets and routines that kick into and out of gameplay seamlessly at the click of a button. These add things like collapsing buildings, bridges, explosions, or just executing somebody in stylish fashion. It's Gears, it feels like Gears, and it always looks good.
Here on Hell Island. Hey, you still there?
What? You made it! This is Jack. I'm here to get you. Got a location?
On it!
The two biggest major differences between the Series X and every other version is the Series X runs far more screen space reflections on all vertical and horizontal surfaces. You can see a good shot of it here with the shadows being reflected back, which are completely missing on the S, the X and the Xbox One S. And then on top of that, the text quality details are better and all the real-time cinematics run at 60 FPS rather than 30. It's the only one that handles it.
A real hell of an honor.
Shared sentiment, soldier? That's why you're here. Best of the best. This here's Hannah Cole. She's my number one on this covert operation. She knows a lot about science things and is, well, in general, quite pleasant to be around.
Advanced degrees in biochemistry, toxicology, chemistry, and science things. Thanks, Hoff.
One of the biggest, what I call quality of life improvements from next generation is really that loading and action into and out of any element you want. And this is where the X and the S, that's the Series X and the Series S, for those that aren't sure, really stand out from the older generation. These are all installed on the internal hard drive, but the delta between them, as you can see on screen, is monstrous. It's almost instantaneous, and they are definitely leveraging that additional power of the SSD and, more importantly, those Zen CPUs, because not only do we see the benefits in loading the sections and jumping back to the main screen, but we also see next to no judder and stutter when the game loads certain points, which are present on both the Xbox One X and certainly on the Xbox One S. You get a lot of judder and stutter at certain points when it loads into the next sequence or when it auto saves in certain levels, and these simply aren't present by and large on the S and the X, and that's down to the SSDs and that CPU power, which really helps the streaming and the seamless integration of the game. So the final piece to touch on ahead of performance is resolution, and as you might expect, there is a bit of a difference. Every version is dynamic, every version uses the Unreal Engine reconstruction, but the Xbox One comes in at the lowest. It goes from 1920 by 1080 down to 1440 by 810, around 44% scaling, and then the Xbox Series S hits a target of 2560 by 1440, scaling down to 1920 by 1080, again a 46% scaling level. And then the Xbox One X targets a high point of 3200 by 1800, going down to 1920 by 1080. That's a higher level of scaling there. And then unsurprisingly, it's wrapped off by the Series X having the highest, targeting a fully native 3840 by 2160 and dropping as low as 3200 by 1800 here. So that's only a 30% scaling level. It may go lower and probably does, but it regularly hovers around that level, so that's the most likely that it sits at more often than not. And then this is all wrapped up with that performance level, with every version targeting 60 FPS aside the Xbox One, well, the Xbox One S, everything else is 60, and then the Xbox One Series X, Xbox Series X, Xbox SSX, Jesus, that's got 60 FPS in cutscenes, 60 FPS in action, so that's the most consistent overall. And then, like I say, you've got the additional benefits of the screen space reflections, screen space shadows, better GI lighting, high quality texture assets. Some of the areas you can see generally that it's trying to push an Xbox One title, certainly on geometry. There's a lot of squared off edges on heads and objects. The geometry count has definitely been driven for an Xbox One game, and it's one of the areas where I mentioned in my Halo analysis, with Halo Infinite analysis, this is where the Coalition are correct. They've literally said we cannot do 60 FPS at this level, so we target 30. We dynamically scale down to 18 to 810p, and we run it at half the frame rate of every other version. That's exactly how you should. Then every other version runs 30 FPS cutscenes to really push out those cinematic quality, and then on the Series X, you push that right up to 60 FPS, 4K as often as you can, and then you push the extra effects that GPU can handle. So that'll be things like ray tracing reflections, ray trace shadows, GI, all that kind of good stuff that really enhances the visual quality. That's where they should be targeting it, just like I said on that video. So hopefully 343 will follow the Coalition's lead here and drop that 60 FPS target on the Xbox One, like I said, when the game comes out next year, because this really shows that a game can look superb, really high quality, consistently overall on all versions, but you have to take sacrifices on those base old consoles. And 60 FPS, it was never really designed for it from the start. Anyway, not without heavy sacrifices. So performance on the Xbox Series X is, as you would imagine, pretty solid. It's 60 all the time. Cinematics, there's a few stutters every now and then when you're moving into cutscenes, context switching, all standard stuff. But generally, there is no concerns at all, and it doesn't tear any points that I picked up. Then you go over to the Series S and the Series X, and they are put together because pretty much they are the same. The resolution's slightly higher on the Series S, sorry, it's the Xbox One X, but it's lower on the Series S. Oh my god, these names! But the performance is better on the Series S, and the quality of the visuals are better, even though the textures are quite close, there's not much in it. The shadow quality, the GI lighting and the screen space reflections, all those areas are slightly better on the Series S than they are on the Xbox One. So generally it's the one I would pick. It's very, very close between them, but generally you're not going to stand a massive difference. But there's a little bit more judder, a little bit more tearing, a little bit more stutters on the Xbox One X than there is on the Series S. So it's definitely second in the pecking order, with the Xbox One X being third. But overall performance is pretty solid, and like I say, the 30 FPS sequences can judder and stutter as they go into them or between shots, but it's generally quite minimal. And then finally it's wrapped up by the Xbox One S, which comes in the lowest of the lot. It really can struggle at certain points. Cutscenes can judder and stutter. It tears more often in the top section than any other version, so its adaptive VSync as standard. It can scale more aggressively at certain points, like I say, but generally it's the worst of the lot, not unsurprisingly, and it has additional cutbacks, as I've already covered at the start. So lower quality textures, lower quality reflections, less bloom, less light, lens flare, less GPU effects overall really hit the console. So certain points you can really see the difference between the two, the delta, but generally it's a very good and consistent performing title on the Xbox One, considering how old the console is and how much this engine is scaling. It's still very, very impressive that it's running as well as it is, so the Coalition deserves a round of applause. The title and the game itself is a lot of fun. It's great. Some of the the physics-based animation, the dismemberment, the soft body physics, they haven't moved on massively from the original title, and it shows how ahead of the game Gears was back then in the mid-2000s, and it still feels good now. But shooting an enemy and making them swagger, taking their head off with an arrow, all of those areas still feel as fun as ever, and the combat is fast, intuitive and enjoyable. I just hope that in the next Gears they really start to change some of the elements of the title and try to move away from just doing the same thing that they've always done. It works, it's great, it's enjoyable, but I'd like to see some fresh avenues in terms of vehicle combat, exploration, level traversal, vertical and horizontal combat, takedowns, some kind of combat system that doesn't use hiding behind walls and shooting people in the face. Just diversify the game, more puzzles, more elements that make you think laterally. It's fun, it's short, and it really adds an additional element to the Game Pass over the Christmas period. So if you have an Xbox or PC, I can recommend this as one to pick up and play. If you like Gears, then you'll love it. It's short, it's to the point, but it's still a hell of a lot of fun. Anyway, that's it. I'm out. And if you enjoyed this or anything else that I've put together, then please like, share and subscribe, because that really helps me immensely. And I'll see you on the next one.
Is that?
It's shooting acid!
Right, this island could get fucked. Glad to be getting far away from this nightmare.